What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Uncommon Ground. We are your podcast for the most uncommon conversations you may have or fear to have. To my left is Sam McGregor. He's pastor of Allison Creek Church. He is our knowledgeable...
Oh, wow. Knowledgeable. Really?
Pastor.
I think I'm knowledgeable. Gosh, after 3 podcasts, you describe me as knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I'm unknowledgeable.
Oh, okay. You're setting me up now. You're playing the dummy, and so now you want to keep zinging me.
Oh, yep, no. It's gonna be question time in a little bit. It's like quiz number 1.
Yeah.
It's a pop quiz.
Okay.
I am Michael Wright. I am the non-believer of the group. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in a lot of the spiritual stuff and everything like that. I believe that the Bible is a great storytelling book. And we get my views on that. And then to my right is Janine Wright. She's my wife, and she's more of a spiritual person. She's the better half of me that may correct me on some certain things, but
like a good wife should.
Yeah.
Constantly correcting you.
So we're all here to have conversation and just make sure that people who do have the uncomfortableness of wanting to talk with other people who may not have the same view as them, that is perfectly fine. And that we can all get along and everything's all happy.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Janine, you weren't part of the last podcast. So
no.
Mike and I got into nasty.
Oh, yeah. When he came back to the house, he had black and blue eye. And, and he was crying and he curled up in fetal position.
Yeah. Without you, Janine, you're that glue that holds it together in a peaceful, cooperative way. And without you, it just turned nasty.
Oh, man.
I had to edit that part out of the video.
But I do want to say that with all of our different views, we don't want to feel like we're trying to persuade anyone to side with us or to change your mind. We want you to take the information in our point of views and kind of go further with that, not just think that you have to, side with us or believe, what we're saying. Go out, do the research yourself. And if there's questions that you have, you definitely can send them our way. But we want people to feel like they can, make their own mind up. We're not trying to make you feel any way or take any side.
Speak for yourself. I want everybody to say, that Sam McGregor is knowledgeable and correct, and I just need to do everything he says and believe everything he says.
But I mean, yeah, that's what we want. And we've actually had people who watched the podcast actually send us some things that are like kind of like questions
and things that made them actually go into their faith a little bit more and have to reiterate or just look for those answers as well. Things that they might not have realized they had a question about, and it's actually opened their eyes and it's made them kind of intrigued about, having more questions and getting those answers.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking? I mean, are these people who know you or just people online?
People
that
know us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do
you mind me asking what kinds of comments or questions that they've shared?
Basically they want to know, it's more of why Mike isn't a believer, and also it's I guess you could say it makes them want to learn, I guess, the storyline, because we were talking about storylines and lessons that we were through Exodus, and lessons that were kind of the prominent standout lessons, and I think that maybe they interpreted things different. And so they wanted to kind of pinpoint certain things that was brought up during those conversations.
Yeah, and people sent me literature that they wanted me to read.
Yes. So, and we read them. We read all of them. Yeah, and that's what we welcome questions and comments.
They're going to get you saved, man.
Yeah.
See, I have this secret group out there, Mike, and it's all going to get you saved at the end, and then we're going to have this big festival. And,
man.
Yeah.
Can I have a Ferris wheel? Will I fit in the parking lot?
Oh man!
You're gonna have a water flume that's going to be a baptism where you go down the water.
That actually would be really cool.
and into the pond, Yeah.
Oh man! Awesome. So today we're gonna talk about. We're gonna kind of
the beginning.
Start it from the beginning. Yeah.
So Sam, start off with how you wanted to start it.
Well, there have been several times in our conversations where mention of Adam and Eve had come up. And so I said, eventually let's talk about those creation stories. So these are the stories, and I say stories intentionally because a lot of folks think that there is a creation story, but there is not. There is two creation stories. And that's what I was taught in seminary, and when I was reading through to prepare for this podcast, as I was reading through the first two chapters of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, it became even more evident to me that these are clearly two stories that have been put side by side. And so in chapter 1 of Genesis into the first part of chapter 2, we have the stories of it's headlined in my NRSV Bible as the 6 days of creation, but actually we know there's 7 days of creation because we do not need to shortchange God's rest after the 6 days. And so this is the account where you have, day 1, the light and the darkness, and on through each day, God creates something different. And then it gets to day 6, where God creates the animals and the people. And the first story, when we get to God creating people, actually, 1:27 says God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And God blessed them and told them to be fruitful and multiply. And then we have a second story that happens right after that, which is, my Bible actually headlines it as another account of creation. And that's where we get the story of Adam and Eve, and the story of God creating a human. And I say intentionally a human because the term Adam, A-D-A-M, is the way it's transliterated in English, can be argued that originally it's not a male creation, it is a human creation. And only when in the story where there is a rib taken out of the side of Adam, the human being, that's in the creation of Eve, that's when gender is created in the second account. And in the Hebrew language affirms that, because after the separation of Adam and Eve, or the creation of gender, that's when different words are used, which is Isha and Isha, which are gender names. So Adam, the name Adam, takes on the male character, and Eve is the female character, Ish and Isha. But then from in the story, Ish and Isha is dropped into Adam and Eve being the male and the female. So only after the separation of pulling the rib, which is rib out of the side, it's not out of, it's a equivalent of mutuality, rib being, at the side. So that's, to me, is a sign of the equality of gender, male and female. And then the last piece of this story that I want to share is when we actually get into the third chapter of Genesis, and we read about their sin of Adam and Eve, and they're told not to eat of the fruit of the tree of good knowledge, and Eve does, and then Adam eats it as well, and then God says, why did you do that? And then the first things that they start doing is blaming each other. Well, Adam says, Eve made me do it, and Eve says, the serpent made me do it. And then we get a prescription of the results of their sinfulness, and that is where Eve or women will have pain in childbirth, and males like Adam will be have to toil in the dirt, and also as a result of the sin, not part of God's original creation, but as a result of this sin, then women will be submissive. I'm not sure submissive is the word, but will be, maybe it is. I'm trying to find it. Women will be submissive. Let's just go with submissive. That women will be submissive to men, and or lord, or the male will lord over the female. That is not a part of God's creation, but that is a result of human sin. So that's what's going to happen because of human sin, that women will be treated as inferior to males in our world. So I kind of throw that out there and saying we can go from there.
So does that, real quick on that, so does that prove that God would be a female because females like
Oh
attack
gosh,
each
don't
other?
say that.
Not going there.
Okay, so my issue with all of that is, one, Adam could have started out as a male, but because we didn't have anything,
No reference.
we just, once Eve was there, then we had to say, okay, we have to kind of have a thing to, the difference between the two. What do you think a world would look like if Eve did not take the apple?
First of all, it's not an apple. We don't know what kind of fruit it is.
Well,
We
fruit.
just know
Okay.
it's fruit.
A fruit.
So, well, see, the way I read the story is that
Macintosh would not be around.
Macintosh.
were you going Apple computer on that? Because Macintosh is actually, isn't that a form of a variety of apple? So I think that, to me, this story, Janine, plays itself out over and over and over again. It's not just a story of an original story, but it's a story that we are all face temptations, and we all succumb to those temptations that look sweet at the moment, but have deadly consequences for us. And we respond by blaming other people. It's not my fault. It's whatever. So
in other words, if it wasn't Adam and Eve that did it, someone else would have done it.
yes.
Okay. So that was ultimately what was going to be the fate of us. Like that was. So were they?
Well, see, I read the story differently, and let me tell you how I read it. I read it not so much as a story, the Adam and Eve part of this story. I read that part of the story as a description of current reality, not that this happened, so therefore we are living into that world because it happened long ago, but it's a reflection. It's telling a current story. Is the way I read the second creation story. So it helps me interpret current reality, because I think that this is a story written to be current reality, not a this happened and so therefore our world is this way because of that happening. Now, the first story, the story that lays out the 6 + 1 days of creation, I think do tell a story of God creating the world, but it's not a story that tells the how God created the world, and that's where people get confused and adopt this whole creationism philosophy or whatever, that God created the world in 6 literal days or whatever. Well, that's misunderstanding the story. It's not a story about the high. Science tells us the how the world was created. That's why this story does not conflict with evolutionary theory, in my opinion. Science tells us the how. This story tells us the why. And the why is that, one, God did it. God is in control of creating the world. And then God created the world good. And when God created human beings, God said, this is very good. And and the whole it's told in a way that we, in our limited understanding, can understand it. It's like trying to teach a huge philosophy to a child. You use language that they would understand. And so a week, with 7 days, is a way that we can understand a scientific evolutionary process that took millions and millions and millions of years, but by breaking it down by using language that we can understand, then we understand the process or the why of why that happened. There's a lot of big stuff here, and I've thrown out a lot of big stuff because I want to get it all out on the table, and then we can go with it whatever direction y'all want to go with.
I mean, I definitely like that you actually said that it took longer than just 7
Mike
days.
in the timeline.
No, I mean,
the world is not 10,000 years old.
Okay.
Or 6,000 years old. That's what a creationist would say.
Right. So, I mean, that makes me happy to hear you say that, because that's a big thing that a lot of people will argue. I hear it a lot, that it's 7 days, even though they don't understand. And then that's when the argument, and I know I hate saying it, but that's when the argument of, what about dinosaurs? But the whole thing about it is, it said in there that he supposedly created animals on this day, and dinosaurs were considered animals. So it had been like a long time ago. So if you want to go by 7 days, it takes millions of years to create this.
Right. Well,
and a day is like one small era.
Well, and the day, animals and humans are both created on the 6th day.
Do you believe animals have souls?
I think, yeah.
Okay. I've had a conversation with someone else and they said no, and I actually think they do, to be honest. I think they're very close to God.
I mean, I think there's something unique in animals in a certain relation. I mean, you can see it in the eyes, that there's something in those eyes that say there's something beyond there. It's not just, there's something beyond there that's beyond our understanding.
So interestingly enough, I mean, it goes with the creation and stuff that, he created this, but the person that she's talking about, he is a born again. And
well, I'm not sure if he's, but he's, the
assumption is probably on me.
You realize that those folks may be calling me now and saying,
but
you're a heretic, Sam McGregor.
It seems that a lot of born agains are very like adamantly like Bible thumpers that everything in there is 100% fact.
Right. And let me tell you why they think that. Why it's important to them, because they would say that if you say that the story of Adam and Eve is not a literal story, then that means everything else. It's like a house of cards. That if you say that this is not a literal story, then what about this? What about this? And so they can't comprehend that something doesn't have to be literal to be true, because it in their minds it destroys the whole Bible, and they just can't. And I realize I'm stereotyping, but that they can't allow themselves to go there, because then that allows them to challenge other things that maybe they've been told since they were early child to believe this. And if I start doubting Adam and Eve are a literal story, then all this other stuff I was taught may not be actually true as well, and so that's going to destroy my whole faith. And so they don't want to go there. So they're going to fight harder and harder to defend the literalness of this story.
And I think that's what scares people about people like me. Because
you scare the heck out of me, Mike.
I know. Every day.
I'm just trembling, man.
But like, so how this conversation came to be.
Janine is like, oh gosh, Mike comes in. He's like trembling.
There's actually a leash back here, and I'm like holding him back. I'm pulling him back so he doesn't.
Sorry, I just keep jabbing you right when you're about to say something pivotal.
That's private information. But so they were saying that God created animals for the consumption of man. And I disagree.
Or the consumption of man.
Like that was their
that
sole
the animals are
Well,
the animals are going to eat people.
No, the man for the consumption for man. For,
like that was their sole purpose.
That was their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But and when you read it, it's actually not. It says that God created like the birds to take care of the air and the fish to take care of the sea and the like the bovine characters that cover the land and stuff. But it says for human to take dominion of them, not to eat them. And dominion is a completely different thing. But I think people are confusing the two.
That with,
because in the sin part, then God says, well, now you just killed all the cows because now they got to eat them. But that's not what it is.
Right.
Dominion, he didn't create them for that.
Right. Dominion means being a good steward. And steward doesn't mean raping the world and animals for your own self.
Right.
That is not the intention of creation, that we are to live, that the humans are given the responsibility to care for, good stewards of the land and the animals and, the air.
But their argument is that because they said that human is supposed to have dominion over animals, that they're for consumption and that they don't have souls.
Right. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people have interpreted dominion to mean domination, and that is not what the Hebrew word is referring to. It's about being a good steward and caretaker.
But the funny thing is that I'm on the fence trying to prove to this person that animals would have souls.
He doesn't.
Even though I'm
like,
against
what?
even though I don't believe people have souls, I feel so.
But he's fighting for the animals.
I feel like his view of it is
because it doesn't go with his concept.
Right.
If his
it's
concept
so skewed that I'm fighting against him to try and prove him right and wrong at the same time.
I'm trying to help your argument, man.
You're blowing me, man. But I don't know I don't know how to argue with you now.
But it's like and it's kind of crazy to me. But it's a lot of these born agains, and they seem to be the ones that want to argue with me.
Yes, and I would expect that.
So it's kind of crazy. But it's also interesting that it has to go with like the beginning of this. But most of my issues with the first couple chapters of Genesis is that there's, like you were saying, that it has to be told in a certain way, like to a child, so they can understand and grasp the knowledge of it. But I feel like there's so much contradiction in certain parts that it's almost like you tell someone something and then they're like, oh, I get it. And then you're like, hold up, there's more. I got more to tell you.
What do you see as a contradiction?
So in the creation, when he does talk about like creating like the fruit and all this other stuff, he says, or it says in the Bible, that God created it for man to eat and to eat whatever they want. Like they can eat whatever fruit they want.
Where do you see that?
Let me pull this up.
Okay.
And then in the next chapter, he's like, you can eat, but you can't
you have to think
everything.
of it. You have to think of it in the way of like, let's say you go to someone's house and you say, oh, you can, make yourself at home. But that room right there, that's my office, and I'd rather no one go in there. But everywhere else, you can make yourself at home. So it's kind of that kind of thing. So there is like, it's not like it was a setup.
So
the earth. I'm looking at chapter 1:12. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind, bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And that was evening, and there was nothing the third day. There's nothing about that it was created for people to consume.
There is one spot. I know it. I read it. Talk amongst yourselves.
You can stop the tape and edit it out.
Yeah.
But no, it's, let's see. Okay, so it says, and God said, behold,
where are you looking?
It's 29, Genesis
Chapter
129. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed as its fruit. You shall have them for food.
You're right.
And to every beast of the earth and every bird should be creeps on the earth. Everything. I will see. Yeah, that was, so that's the line. So he says that I have given you every
green plant for food.
Right.
And it was so.
And then in the second chapter, he's going, well, you can't eat this fruit though. Right. So there's a little bit of contradiction right there.
Well, no, I don't see that as a contradiction. He's well, again, it's two different stories.
Right, but the problem is that this one is is part of the second story.
No, it is not part of the second story. The first story goes through chapter 2, 4. So that's a second story. So
well, let me explain
so
why.
if
then.
you read contradictions, it's because they're two different stories. And what I love about the Bible is it does not try to meld the different stories. It just lays it out there and allows God's Spirit to work through both stories.
So the reason why I'll say that is a
Which
contradiction.
your born-again friends are going to be like, oh my gosh,
I
I can't believe this guy is saying this. I'm going to get all sorts of emails through my,
We'll
through
have
my
that all
church,
linked down below.
through email address.
So I
It's
think,
AllisonCreekChurch.com, by the way.
There you
Pastor
go.
at AllisonCreek.com. And I would love to get your emails.
there's a donation box on
Yes,
the website.
There is a
you go.
donation box on the
there-
website.
So before you
So-
leave your message, donate.
Yes. So if you want to really nasty say things about me, you're permitted only if you leave a donation.
We recommend $10.
More
So
than
the
that.
reason why, well, that's just the minimum,
Okay.
just so they can send an email.
Okay.
So the reason why I say it's contradiction and that technically it's the same story is in the first part it says that he created man or God created man.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there is like just an excerpt of chapter 2. Chapter 2 like expands on it. But so right here we're saying that this was made. So there should be like a footnote saying if you want to know more about the creation of man, go to chapter 2.
No, it's two different stories. And you don't need to try to meld the stories. And that's what people have done, but the stories are come more alive if you read them as two different stories side by side and to say, how is God's Spirit speaking through each of these stories? I don't have to make things fit for God's truth to be revealed through them.
So okay, being like that, do you feel that if you were watching
Being like
Being
that.
like
What is
that.
no? What does that mean,
That was an
Janine?
insult.
That it's
Hold
not-
on.
That was an insult, Janine.
that if it's different stories,
I just feel so down now.
so if they're different stories, if you're watching a TV show,
Does he ever say that to you, Jean?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Janine, you're being like that.
so if it was like a TV show and this is one episode and this is another episode, if you're watching the second episode or you're watching the first episode and you get this information and then you watch the second episode, you're like, wait, that's not what they said in the first episode.
It's not the same creator of the two episodes. It's like two different. It's like not episode 1, episode 2, but you watch one on Showtime and one on Netflix.
But they're covering the same
But
thing.
it's covering the same. They're covering the same. They're attempting to tell the same story.
On the same DVD. Doesn't that seem to cause conflict? Doesn't that seem to cause conflict?
Confusion.
What do you mean?
Confusion. Maybe slight confusion.
Okay, it causes confusion. You again, if you have one channel saying that this and you have another channel saying this and you're trying to put the two together, but you're like, wait,
I don't need to put them together.
Well, you just did in the book.
No.
When it's a collection of stories,
yes.
they come together
Right,
as
it's
one.
It's. I mean, think of it more like a library. Which is what the Bible is. It's a library. It's a collection of books in a library. It's not one book. It's a collection of books, 66 books. And so you pick out 2 books and you read. I mean, you think about any subject. You decide, okay, I want to learn more about whatever. And so you go and you get more than one book about that subject. And so you read both books and you say, what out of this story am I learning about that subject? And what out of this story am I learning about that subject?
But
I think the thing is, I don't think most people know that.
But
I think
how would you
that's probably
determine
the
that
problem.
based on the book? Because it just says Genesis. It doesn't give you
Correct.
like another like writer of this subject.
Right. You probably
so how are you
have
supposed to know
one.
that?
You probably have one editor who put it together, but it's more like a librarian who decides to put 2 books side by side. That
Right,
cover
but
the
you'll have
same
the name
area.
of the author on the side of the
Sorry,
the
you
spine
get
of the
no
book.
name of the author.
Yeah, and so how do you determine that each one is a different story written by a different person?
Because
to
if you
make
read it, so I challenge you, and this is this has been engaging. We could go on for a long time, but if we're going to keep our 30 minutes,
but this is
going to
be homework for Mike and
this is gonna be
every
homework.
all of
So I want you to do
viewers.
this, Mike.
Yeah.
That sounds so condescending. Remember, I am the knowledgeable one here. Okay?
Thanks, Sam.
Okay, I am the knowledgeable one.
Oh man.
All right, so read the story and read through chapter 2, verse 4, and then see what happens in the second part of verse 4 in chapter 2, and then read that through the end of the actually it's the next couple of chapters, because then you get into Cain and Abel, and it goes on that way. But read it through with a discerning mind, with a skeptical mind, and say, there's a real shift here. This doesn't make sense to be one story. This is actually two stories side by side. So that's your homework.
There you go. And he said it.
Just ask yourself.
Drop the mic.
And it shall be done.
Ask yourself, is this one story or is this two stories? And then the next time we get back together, we're going to talk about it. And you're going to go, well, Sam, you are so knowledgeable.
Oh,
correct.
All right.
And then we go down, and you go down the flume, and we're baptized. And your born again friends will celebrate.
Yep. And we'll have a feast, and I'll have donuts.
Oh, goodness.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Wrap us up, Janine.
Definitely. Well, we definitely want you guys to get involved in the conversation. Leave your questions, leave your comments. If you want to do the homework that Mike was given, definitely do that. Go back and, read everything, and just let us know what what you guys are thinking and how we're doing. And once again, check out Allison Creek Church. We'll link everything down below so you guys can check that out, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
Thank you very much.
All
We'll
right.
see you later.
Bye.